What's happening? Thanks for joining me as always on this Monday morning. Absolutely fantastic to be back in the studio at home, ready to talk Patriots with you. A big week ahead. Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday nights, I'll be hosting solo and doing headlines on 98.5 The Sports Hub. Wednesday night, we will cram in a Revs game in between, and then I'm back on Saturday as well, 2 to 5. On Saturday doing headlines and hosting solo. I appreciate all of your support. Some of you have actually called in to the 98.5 shows. That's a fantastic situation. So I appreciate every single one of you. Let's start at wide receiver. Let's start at wide receiver and take a look at a possible wide receiver one in the future and some news that we got over the weekend. Ian Rappaport reported that T Higgins will not sign an extension. So he is set to hit free agency after this year. He will be an unrestricted free agent in 2025, which is very unusual now when you look across the NFL. When we talk about top receivers, even if you think he's a 1B, it's a very unusual situation that a young, early to mid-20s wide receiver who's been productive, who is seen by many as a true number one receiver, very unusual that a guy like that is going to hit the market. Now, the reason why he is going to hit the market eventually is because they've got Jamar Chase, as we know, no doubt a number one of the best receivers in football. He's going to get paid big time bank. You look at Joe Burrow, his contract situation, all of those different things play a role. And we know that Mike Brown, the owner of the Bengals, he doesn't necessarily have as much money as some other owners in the league have at his disposal. So he is seen as cheap. He doesn't spend as much money as other guys, other women. So, this is a situation, a scenario that is played out that will lead T Higgins to free agency. Now, Cincinnati, of course, could tag T Higgins next offseason and look to trade him. But I think for the Patriots' sake, and I would imagine many of you would agree with this, T Higgins should 100% be on the radar for the Patriots right now. Right now. Not just next offseason. Right now, he needs to be on that list. And I think for the Patriots' sake, free agency would be a much better option. To land T Higgins without giving up any assets would be a huge win, right? The only thing that you'd worry about, if you were going to worry, and I would not be worried, is how much money is he going to make? But money is money. And it's much easier to spend money on a receiver like Higgins than trade a top-notch pick for him and then pay him as well. So free agency would be huge. And I know that's a year down the road. I get it. And I understand that when you look at this team, you want a wide receiver one on the team right now. But this is the kind of thing that Elliott Wolf is planning out, right? When you're a GM, when you're a president of football operations, whatever title you have, right? Vice president of player personnel, whatever title that you have, if you're calling the shots in personnel, you're thinking about not just right now, but you're thinking about next year, the year after. And you know what you have to acquire. You understand the weaknesses on your roster. And we all understand that wide receiver, at least at the top, the tippity top of the depth chart, is a weakness for the Patriots. So to go out there and get somebody like Higgins is a top priority for this front office. It has to be. So whenever somebody's name pops up, whether it's Ayuk or some would argue even Deebo Samuel, you look at CeeDee Lamb, who's not getting along with Dallas right now, and that thing's kind of rocky, and they've got Dak Prescott's contract that they've got to figure out as well. So you start to look at all of these receivers, and you start to figure out who is actually available and how. How in the world can we land one of these guys? And to sign a receiver who is seen as a number one by many, just to sign that receiver straight up is a tremendous opportunity because it doesn't happen very often. So the fact that T Higgins could be an unrestricted free agent and he's in the market next year and most likely will be, that gives you a fantastic opportunity to bring on somebody who can make a big impact at a position that you sorely need. So no assets would be great. And the Patriots have tons of cap space. We've talked about it. They still have over $40 million in cap space right now. They have over $100 million in cap space for next offseason. They can kick some of the cap space from this year into next year to create even more space. I mean, it's possible the Patriots could have upwards of like $120 million in cap space next offseason. So if teams start to line up for Higgins, the Patriots will be at the front of that line because they'll have need and they'll have a ton of money to drop on the table for T. So free agency would be a great opportunity. And you wouldn't have to spend a draft pick on a receiver next year either, right? I mean, we look at this team and we've talked about it. This roster has a lot of defensive guys walking into the final year of their contracts. Now, some of those contracts have been redone. They've been extended. Somebody like Jelani Tavai gets his contract extension. He now has a number of years left on his deal. But when you look at a number of other players, right? Jonathan Jones in the last year of his deal. Matthew Judon, who we'll talk about in a couple of minutes. Judon in the final year of his deal. Joshua Uche has a one-year deal that he signed in the offseason. So he's in the final year of a contract. And you look at these players and you understand that in some spots, the Patriots are going to have to get younger defensively. And I think when you look at next year's draft, according to the pundits and the experts, defensive side of the football is where the draft is going to be at its deepest next year. So when you look at this idea of spending draft capital on the defensive side next year after spending all but one pick this year on your offense, and then you also think about, well, what happens if Chukwuekorfor doesn't quite work out at left tackle and you have to devote a pick to left tackle? That would be a tough situation, right? But you're looking at that as at least a possibility. And then you look at wide receiver one, and you still need a bona fide wide receiver one. It would be so much better for the Patriots if they could spend money at wide receiver next offseason, land that positional need without sacrificing a draft pick. It would mean a hell of a lot. And I mean, could you imagine? I think you would feel pretty good. I would have to assume you'd feel pretty good if the Patriots wide receiver core walking into 2025 was T Higgins, Jalen Polk, Pop Douglas, Javon Baker. I think if that's your top four, you feel pretty good about it, especially compared to the last couple of years. But there could be another option. There could be another option with T Higgins and Cincy, which I want to get to. But before I get to that, don't forget to give us that like, the thumbs up on the YouTube channel. Always helps us out tremendously. We beat that algorithm. So if you like the show, if you love the show, give us that thumbs up, trying to grow the audience. Also, don't forget to comment and subscribe. Rate and review Spotify, Apple Pods. If you're over there, you can rate and review the show. You can slide on over to YouTube. You can dance on over. You can shimmy on over and give me that like on the YouTube channel and go back to Spotify and Apple Pods and listen to the podcast. So like, comment, subscribe on YouTube, and then rate and review on Spotify and Apple Pods. And I just found out as we started to roll here that apparently I cannot stream to Twitter anymore unless I'm a premium member. Just another way to try to kneecap a content creator. You got to love it. So I was actually sending this podcast out to Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. And right when I hit to go live, they didn't warn me about this beforehand, which is fantastic by them. Right when I hit to go live, it told me you can't stream to YouTube. You can't stream to Twitter because you're not a premium member. So thanks. Thank you. Elon Musk just trying to take my money. I appreciate you trying to survive here. Thank you, Elon. Thank you. It's awesome. So every like, every comment, every subscription, the ratings, the reviews, they help me an awful lot. I appreciate every single one of you. So the other option about T Higgins, right? The other option to try to get T Higgins. What can the Patriots do? I was thinking about this last night, about the trade option. Now, not right now, because it certainly seems like Cincinnati is planning on walking into the year with Higgins. They want Higgins and Chase to be there for Joe Burrow. That's their plan. They want to be as offensively sound as possible, have as much firepower as possible. So I don't think you can trade for Higgins right now. But there is a scenario. And the scenario is this. What happens if Cincinnati isn't playing well? What happens if you get closer to the trading deadline? The Bengals are kind of back of the pack or not playing as well as they expected. What happens if T Higgins becomes a distraction in some kind of way? What happens, and hopefully we don't see this because we love watching great players, right? But what happens if Joe Burrow gets hurt again? He's been very, very injury prone since he was drafted. What happens if Burrow gets hurt again and since he loses their all-world starting quarterback? Cincinnati, at that point, if they're falling short of expectations, if the quarterback is hurt, if Higgins is a distraction, if any of those things actually play out, then I would not be surprised at all if Higgins is available at the trading deadline. And if I'm the Patriots, I am jumping right into those talks. And that's why if I'm Elliott Wolf, I'm calling Cincinnati right now. I'm sure he already had conversations with Cincinnati at some point during this offseason, but I'm still calling Cincinnati to try to lay the groundwork just in case there is going to be a trade down the road, right? I want to make sure that I've put that phone call in. I don't know how many of you saw Hard Knocks. And Joe Shane, who's the GM of the Giants, he's at the combine. And he says, I'm going to go and talk to Elliott Wolf. I'm going to go talk to the Patriots because they obviously loved themselves some Drake May. And Shane goes over to Wolf in the Patriots suite, and he lays the groundwork for a possible trade. He says, if you guys are looking to move out of 3, if you're looking to move down, if that pick is going to be available, I would appreciate that you give me a phone call before you make any decisions. And that is laying the groundwork. And so if Cincy has a tough year unexpectedly, or Burrow gets hurt, or Higgins, becomes a distraction, I'm sure that Wolf, if he hasn't already, and he probably has, but he will get on the phone before the season and he will lay that groundwork. He will tell Cincinnati, hey, look, I understand you want T Higgins this year. I understand what your plan is. But if things happen unexpectedly and you find yourself in a position that you're looking to deal T, we would appreciate a phone call before you make any decisions. And the reason why I would absolutely be in on a deal for T Higgins during the season is, number one, it gives you the inside track to get a contract extension done. It's much easier to sign a guy to a big time deal when you have him in the facility, right? You bring him onto your team, you bring him into the facility. He is a member of the Patriots to finish out 2024, and you go to work right away with his agent. Look, we're not Cincinnati. We are in need of a number 1 guy. We believe that your client is a number 1 wide receiver. We are willing to pay the money that it will take to make him happy and keep him here for years to come. So you make that trade. Again, if things don't go well in Cincy for whatever reason, if you have the opportunity to make that in-season trade, you do it because you bring Higgins in, you get that contract extension done, and now you don't have to worry about it. You just checked off a huge box on the list before the offseason even begins. And now you can plan, okay, this is how much cap space we have left. This is what we want to devote to that cap space, what positions. And as you're going through your draft work, you now know you don't have to worry about wide receiver. You drafted 2 this year. You acquired T Higgins. You drafted Pop Douglas at that point 2 years ago. You got Kendrick Bourne signed. And so you're set. You're set at receiver. And you go into next offseason not even having to worry about that room because you've got T, you've got Pop, you've got Polk, you've got Baker, you've got Bourne. 5 dudes right there, legitimate NFL receivers slotted into the position they should be slotted into as far as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And you don't even have to mess around with that position anymore. It is solved at least for the next couple of years, and we could all breathe easily. So that's the first reason why I would be in on an in-season trade for somebody like Higgins. The other part of it is, if you bring Higgins in, you have that immediate chemistry with Drake May. And you are trying to develop May. You're trying to build him, right? So if you bring Higgins in during the season, even if it's for the final 6, 7, 8 weeks, whatever it would be, he gets to go to practice right away with Drake. He gets to work with Drake right away. He gets an early feel for Alex Van Pelt's offense and what he needs to do going into 2025. So it gives him a leg up offensively, understanding the scheme, understanding the verbiage, and really creating a relationship on and hopefully off the field with QB1. So when you go into 2025, when you get into minicamp, when you get into training camp, now you have T Higgins having the history with Drake May over final 7, 8 weeks of the season. He has the history with the offense. He understands the scheme. He understands the verbiage. He knows his teammates. And there's that familiarity, which is important, especially when you talk about a young quarterback. And so the idea of acquiring Higgins in season and putting him alongside Drake May to get him a head start, so to speak, on 2025 is very, very appealing to me. Very appealing to me. So what would I be willing to give up for a T Higgins? I would be willing to give up a second-round pick in 2025 for Higgins. I would give up a second-round pick for T Higgins if I get T Higgins and another middle-round pick. So if I could get Cincy, who knows he's going to leave anyway, if I could get Cincy to move and give me T Higgins and a 4th or 5th round pick for a second-round pick, it'd be tough for me to say no. It would be very tough for me to say no to that deal. So that's what I would be looking at. So T Higgins is a name that we absolutely have to keep an eye on as we get ready to move forward, heading towards, what could be a 2-year rebuild, could be a 3-year rebuild. But if you bring in somebody like Higgins, eventually that helps speed up the rebuild process. So we keep an eye on him. We keep our ears open and we see what happens. And it's not a bad idea to root for Cincy to suck. It would not be the worst idea in the world if we are the Cincy suck brigade and hope they stink and turn around and say, you know what? We should have just traded Higgins last offseason. Let's deal him now. Because I absolutely believe Elliott Wolf and the Patriots would be knocking down that door for Higgins. All right, we'll get to Matthew Judon, the latest with him. And I want to play a little best, worst, most likely scenario with Matthew Judon. I saw Tom Curran do this for NBC Sports Boston. I think it's a fun idea. We'll give you the latest with Judon, and we will also look at what could be the best, worst, and most likely scenario with Judon this year. Before I get to that, just quickly, you can check out my Patreon page. If you love what I do with the Patriots content, we are now Patriots only on this pod, Monday, Wednesday, Fridays at 11 a.m. on YouTube. But if you like how I handle Boston sports talk, you can go to the Patreon page. I cover the Celtics there. I cover the big news with them and the Red Sox, the Bruins. People sign up for all different reasons. They sign up for the community chats, mailbag audio podcasts. We do exclusive podcasts. We do one exclusive podcast on Wednesday night, Boston sports. We do an off-the-cuff podcast, which is national sports and other stuff like radio and music and all of that. So we do those. You can get the ad-free versions of these Patriots-only podcasts on the Patreon page. And some really sign up just to help me financially contribute to my survival here. $5 a month, $1.25 a week. Thank you to everybody who is a Patreon member. If you want to check it out, patreon.com/Nick Cattle, CATTLES. All right, let's get to Matthew Judon. So Henry McKenna last week, while I was on a little bit of a vacation with the wifey, Henry McKenna reported that the Patriots and Judon were not close on a contract agreement. Greg Bedard, my buddy at BSJ, he reported last week on the podcast that I do with Greg that Judon, from what he was told, is not going to play on the deal he has currently with the Patriots. If there is no movement on the contract, Judon is not going to play this season. He has no interest playing for the Patriots. Now, of course, with the NFL contracts and how they work, it doesn't really matter. Sound like The Rock. It doesn't matter if Matthew Judon wants to play on this contract or not. If Judon eventually wants to hit free agency, he's got to play on the contract. If there's a line drawn in the sand, unfortunately for him, the way the league works, he's got to go to work to hit free agency. So he can talk all he wants. He can hold out for a certain period of time and then get back to work. But inevitably, the team has all the power in contracts in the NFL. Inevitably, once a guy signs a deal, he is locked into that deal. And he can't sit out and say, okay, well, I'm just going to sit out this year and then I'll be a free agent next year. That's not how it works. That contract would be kicked, down the road to the next season. So he eventually has to play a football game with the Patriots this year. He has to get out there on the field. Now, could he, get an injury? Sure. But I don't think Judon's that type of guy. I don't feel like he's somebody who's going to, fake an injury or do something underhanded like that to get to free agency. So no matter if he likes the deal, hates the deal, doesn't want to work on the deal this year, none of that matters. He eventually has to get his tuk-tuk on the football field. Now, Judon, he did post, and this post came out during the Saturday show I was doing on 98.5 The Sports Hub. Just as I was talking about Judon, he tweeted out. It was a weird coincidence. But Judon posted over the weekend. I'm sure many of you saw this on Twitter. Before y'all get on my ass, I didn't say that at all. Don't let them make me the villain. Now, when you're doing live radio and something comes out like that, a whole bunch of things flood through your head, right? You're trying to figure out who's he talking about, what's he saying, why is he saying it. And my initial read on that tweet was that the them, quote unquote, in the tweet from Judon could be the Patriots. And I said, well, if he's calling them, and if he's saying don't make them, don't allow them to make me the villain, this could be getting a little ugly between the Patriots and Judon. And if that's the case, the Patriots have to move on because you don't want the distraction. You don't want the mess. You don't want that, volatility between the player and the team. You're trying to reset the culture. You got a lot of young guys in the locker room, just not good. But then I thought about it more. And I said, you know what? Them could 100% be the media. And I actually lean towards that opinion. After getting away from the live show and talking about all sorts of other stuff, sat down for a few, and I said, I think he's actually talking about the media and not the Patriots. And the reason why I feel like Judon's talking about the media and not the Patriots is that, number one, Judon has not been that kind of guy who comes out, throws the team under the bus, creates a me versus them kind of feel, right? He's not that kind of guy. He has not been that kind of guy. And so it would be out of character for Judon to tweet about them, the villain, don't make me the villain. It would be out of character if Judon was pointing his finger at the Patriots. So I think Judon's reaction was to Greg Bedard, my buddy. I think Judon's tweet was directly at Bedard because aside from being out of character, it would contradict everything that Judon has said up to this point, right? Judon on the record has been reasonable. He hasn't wanted to start any fires. He's not trying to throw gasoline on any fires. He's not trying to fan the flames, right? Any other cliche saying I could come up with, I'm going to throw at you right now with fire and flames, apparently. He's not trying to be the pot stirrer and cause issues. He's come out, and in the last that we heard from Judon, he said that he and the team weren't that far apart. So as far as what Judon has said publicly, and that doesn't mean it's 100% the truth, but it does tell you how Judon wants to handle the situation. He doesn't want to start any ish with the team. He wants to try to get something done. He has said he wants to stay here. So it seems like an amicable negotiation. They obviously can disagree on the price. They obviously can disagree on the term, whichever or maybe both that they disagree on. But you can still have a negotiation that's amicable and disagree. You agree to disagree and just walk away, right? You walk away from the table. So I don't think, the developing opinion on my part is I think he's pointing his finger, he as in Judon, I think he's pointing his finger at Bedard and saying, I never said that, not how I feel. I'm not entertaining the idea of not playing on this contract that I have currently. And don't allow the media, don't allow Bedard to make me the villain. I think that's what he was saying in his tweet. So it's to clear that up and to make more sense of it, it's more logical if that's the case, instead of Judon trying to pick a fight, so to speak, with the Patriots. All right, so I'm going to get into my best, worst, and most likely scenario with Judon in a minute. First, let's jump to a couple of super chats. My guy, Charlie, and they're still coming up there big. All right. I have to try to figure this out now because this is the second straight time these these chats are huge. And I see others, and they don't have the huge super chats. So I got to check my settings. Something's going on here. But Charlie, got lots of laughs listening to Off the Cuff last night on a long drive home. That's the podcast that I do on the Patreon page on Fridays. Soccer story was just absurd. Yeah. Some schmuck, special copper, whatever the hell they call him, decided to shoot a goalkeeper with a rubber bullet. Just absurd story. I recommend the Patreon as well. Hustle hard, Nick. Thank you, Charlie. I appreciate it. Always appreciate the contributions that you make financially. It means an awful lot to me. So thank you. Donnie jumps in with his oversized super chat. Thank you, Donnie. $10 super chat. The media at this point needs something to talk about with the Patriots in a rebuild. So I do think they create situations to have clickbait. So here's what I'll say, Donnie. And I know many people might disagree with this. I get it. I don't think Greg Bedard is a clickbait guy. I don't. And again, I know people will disagree with it, but Greg, his fundamental philosophy is not to create clickbait. And one of the major reasons why he created Boston Sports Journal was because he got tired of watching all the clickbait that was happening. I think Greg legitimately gets this stuff from sources. Now, here's the thing. Greg is reporting what he's heard from sources. It is it is not his responsibility to create what the sources say, and it's not his job to do that. It's his job to talk to people about situations, report on what he's been told, right? And whoever he spoke to, I believe, said this to Greg. Wherever he got this, he got it from somebody or multiple people that told him Judon's not going to play on his contract. Doesn't make it right. Doesn't make it the truth. And Judon could be 100% accurate saying, I never said that. I don't feel that way. So Greg comes out. He reports what he's heard from the people that he has spoken with. Judon has reacted to that. I think they're both well within their rights. I think Greg is within his rights to report what he's heard. And I think Judon is well within his rights to come out and say, I ain't feeling that way, big guy. Right? So I'm not saying that clickbait doesn't exist. It certainly does. And there's a lot of that right now. And I think you're right, Donnie. I think, when slow times happen, people in the media, many of them, tend to go with the lowest hanging fruit. And I feel like we've seen some of that with the Celtics, with Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum over the last week with the Team USA stuff. And I'm not sure if you got to listen to the show on Saturday on 98.5, but I came out and said my piece on the Tatum Brown stuff. And it was not agreeing with many people that I heard over the last week saying, oh, you got to watch out because Jason Tatum didn't stand up and defend his guy, Jaylen Brown. So there absolutely is clickbait. There's no doubt. And, but I would also say to you, as somebody who's worked in radio for a long time and worked in the media, during a rebuild, it's actually better to get content because the team is not very good during a rebuild. And so you can kind of scoop up some of that stuff, right? I think it was difficult for the media to consistently come up with salacious or sexy stuff with the Patriots during that epic run because they were winning so much. And, media people, a lot of them, especially radio people, They want reaction. They want engagement. And so they want to bring up topics that they think are polarizing topics because they want to have that conversation. They want to go back and forth. And when a team is winning so much, it's tough to come out and do a show and say, hey, man, Patriots are winning. That's all they do is win, win, win. Let's talk about it. 617-779-0985. It's difficult because what are you going to do? You're going to do a show 3 or 4 hours and just talk about how great the team is and like every single day? Now, that doesn't mean that you should embellish or go as far as some people do. And I disagree with a lot of that stuff. And if you followed me long enough, you know that. So I think it depends on the situation. It depends on the scenario. It depends on the story. It depends on the sources. It depends on the writer. It depends on a lot of stuff. What I would say as I wrap up on this thought, what I would say is please don't throw all of the media into the same bucket. And I think some people make that mistake. And they tend to say, oh, the media just wants clicks. The media, judge the person individually. And I hope when people watch this podcast, they judge me individually. Because I know on Twitter, I get some, pushback from people, and it's the same group of people, and many of them are muted. They don't even know, but you're muted from my Twitter. Enjoy that. And I only mute people that have agendas and nonstop attack me or go after me for stupid stuff. But there are people that push back at me on Twitter and try to lump me in with some other people in the Boston media and how they handle certain topics. And if you actually watch and listen to this podcast, I think the vast majority of the content is much different than how many people handle the Patriots, especially on the radio. Doesn't mean that, they're doing a bad job. They do the way they do. Let them be them. So just don't lump everybody in the same bucket. And I think we have a lot of that beyond sports, but I won't go on my tangent. I won't jump on my soapbox. I think people have really started to fall into the trap of that person is in that group. That person is in that group, right? We see it with politics, the red and blue ties. Everybody is judged by a tie color. So I just think try not to lump the media in all the buckets and say, oh, it's just them trying to get clicks. It's just them trying to stir things up. That's happening. I'm not ignorant to that fact. That is 100% happening. The Skip Baylesses of the world exist. But try to judge people individually. That's what I would say. All right. Done with that. Thank you for the super chat. Best, worst, most likely scenario for Matthew Judon. And don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, rate, and review as well. Here's the best case scenario that I believe could happen with Matthew Judon. He signs a reasonable contract extension through 2025. I said on 98.5 on Saturday, I'm not in love with this idea of giving Judon a contract going into 2026 because he's going to be 32 years old in a month. He's coming off of a major injury and surgery. So I am not comfortable giving him a 2-year, 3-year extension and paying him money due to those circumstances, right? So if you could get Judon to agree to a reasonable deal, you tack on money this year, and you give him a reasonable contract for next year, if you can get him to agree on that, I would take that deal. If you told me Judon would be happy through 2025, he's not making ridiculous money coming off of the surgery and with his age, I would take that. I would take that if I was the Patriots. I think he's, when he's been on the field, he's been incredibly productive. I think he's been a really good leader. And his on and off the field impact is important to me if I'm the Patriots. I like the idea, as I've said all offseason, even though some people have said they're bringing back everybody from a 4-win team. I've said throughout the whole offseason, I've said recently, I'm actually a fan of keeping your good players. Call me crazy. I think keeping good players is a good idea. And to me, Judon has been one of your best players when he's been on the field. He's been healthy. Now, his tank has run a little empty towards the end of seasons. And obviously, he had the injury last year. But when he's been out there, he's been an impact guy. And don't just go off of the sack numbers either. He's been an impact guy against the run. He's been an impact guy getting into the backfield and attacking quarterbacks. He's an impact defensive edge. And off the field, he has said mostly all the right things. He has been a great leader. He brings a tremendous vibe to the locker room. He's a very optimistic and happy guy. Even during the down times, he's been, very optimistic and smiling and keeping guys' energy up. And that's important when you're going through a rebuild. When one of your best players has that kind of energy about him, that's crucial. That's crucial. So, when you look at Judon's impact, it makes sense to me. Reasonable deal through 2025. Awesome. The defense to me is going to lead the way in 2024. If this team is going to be competitive, and I don't mean competitive as far as a playoff team, because I don't see that happening. They could surprise me. I had the Red Sox winning 77 games this year. I am so happy to be wrong about that so far. That team has been so damn fun to root for. And yes, if you're wondering, they should absolutely be buyers, and I think they will be buyers. But I don't expect them to be a playoff team this year, but you do want to compete. I mean, you don't want to go out there and be embarrassed. You don't want to be shellacked. You're going against a lot of tough offenses and quarterbacks. So your way to be competitive this year is if your defense stands up and plays well. And Judon on the field, and I know they were a top 10 DVOA defense last year without Judon for the majority of the year, but you can't tell me this team would be better off without Judon than with Judon. So if you can get him to sign a reasonable deal that takes him through next year, I'm good for that. I think that's the best case scenario. The worst case scenario is that Judon just plays out the string. He plays on this contract. He's somewhat miserable playing out the contract because he's not happy. And he just plays out the string, and he walks into free agency, and he leaves your organization, and you get nothing back in return. Zero. Squadoosh. That would not be good. That would be the worst case scenario. He plays on his $6.5 million. He says, thank you, and now I'm leaving. And you don't get anything back. You don't get a draft pick back. You don't get his play back going into 2025. You just let the player walk, and it's over. That's a terrible scenario. Terrible scenario, because if you feel it's going to go that way, then you trade him. If you think it's going towards he's going to play the string out and we're not going to be comfortable giving him a 4 or 5 year contract extension because he's going to be 35, 36 on that deal. If you feel like it's going that way, it's going towards that path, then you deal him right now. Cut the cord, deal him right now, get a pick in return, and continue the rebuild. You cannot let him just walk after the year is over and say, that's it. Now, Let's Go Logo says, I thought they get a comp pick if he leaves. They would be eligible, but as soon as you sign your own big name contract, right? When you go out and you spend a bunch of money, let's say the Patriots go out there and they spend at the top of the market. Remember, they're going to have over $100 million in cap space next offseason. They're going to spend a lot of money. They're going to have to spend a lot of money. When you sign players, when you sign big name players, you no longer get the compensatory pick for your guy leaving. So that's why when last year during the trade deadline, I wanted the Patriots to trade Joshua Uche. I didn't think Uche was going to come back. I thought he was done. Ended up being wrong on that. He somehow, some way, for some reason came back on a 1-year deal on short money. But the idea was trade Uche at the trade deadline because when he walks in the offseason, you're not going to get a compensatory pick for him in return. So it's better to get a 4th, 5th, 6th round pick, mostly a 5th round pick for Judon, as was reported. That was the offer. I would rather take the 5th round pick for Judon at the deadline last year because you're not going to get a compensatory pick for Judon in free agency because you're going to spend money on free agents. You're going to spend money on Onwenu. You're going to spend money on Duggar. You end up spending money on Barmore. So when you spend money in free agency, you lose your eligibility to get that comp pick for Judon. So if Judon walks, you're not getting anything in return for him. And if I'm the Patriots, I am very aware of that. And if it's going down the road of this guy's not going to be here for long, I'm dealing him. As much as I love him, I'm dealing him because it's about the future. Get that pick back. So the worst case, he walks, you get nothing. The most likely scenario. Here's what I think the most likely thing to happen will be with Judon and the Patriots. I think he eventually gets his contract tweaked for this year, much like last year. He gets a tweak, whether it's incentives, whether it's a bonus and incentives. He gets his contract tweaked for 2024 to make him happy this year. The Patriots see how he comes back. They give him the money for this year, and they say, hey, look, we're gonna give you the money this year. We're gonna give you a significant bump. You're gonna get a chance to earn that significant bump, however they do it. And we are open to the idea of keeping you here, Matthew. We want you here. And they evaluate how Judon looks coming back from the surgery. And maybe sometime during the year, they get back to the table with Judon's agent, feeling better about him because he looks good post-surgery. And then they might approach and say, hey, let's tack on a couple of years to his deal. He looks like the same guy. We love him. We don't want him to leave. We've never wanted him to leave. I think that's the most likely scenario is a contract tweak for 2024. And then we'll see what happens. And if he looks good, you get back to the table and you try to figure something out. I'm going to be on 98.5 The Sports Hub tomorrow night, 7 to 11. Wednesday, 7 to 11, kind of. The Revs game's in the middle, so it's really like 7 to 7:30 and then 10 to 11. And then Thursday, I'll be back 7 to 11 as well. Hosting solo, doing headlines, 98.5 Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday night. Back on Saturday afternoon as well, solo, headlines. Don't forget to give us that like. All the thumbs up means an awful lot to us. Now they're not allowing us to stream to Twitter, apparently, unless I give them extra money. So don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Try to get to 3,500 subscriptions. Rate and review. I am out of here. Back tomorrow. Not back tomorrow. Back tomorrow night on 98.5. Back on Wednesday at 11 a.m. here on YouTube to talk more Patriots. Till then, be well. I appreciate you.